Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here, and I found this video from February at the Brookings Institute with a Democratic congressman I really wasn't aware of. However, there has been talk that he may run for the president of the United States. I think he would be the 25th or 26th person actually announcing they're running. And he gave a New World Order speech at the Brookings Institute. Those are his words. He wraps up this speech with that, basically. And he's always talking about new, new, new. And a lot of these things coincide with the stuff that I put into my film, Invisible Empire, A New World Order Defined, all the way back in 2010. Really was working on that for years, studying it. So I knew where they were going to come from. Now, this is probably going to be a longer video because we're going to break down what he says point by point. And, I mean, he does it all here. He's talking about drone proliferation, putting our national security, both foreign and domestic, in the hands of AI. This is all a reality that he's talking about here. This guy's a gun grabber on top of all of this. He pushes the Russian propaganda, and he even talks about climate change as a national security threat. And there's so much deception here that I really considered putting several parts of my movie Invisible Empire, especially when we talked about climate change, in this as well. But I think I'm just going to stick to a small segment on Hepting versus AT&T when he talks about the morality of spying. There's a lot to go over here, so I'm just going to let this guy speak for himself because he is an Iraq war vet. But guys, I want to make something really clear. He's not, somebody that didn't have something else to do and he signed up when he was 18. No, this was a Harvard graduate, okay? He'd already graduated college when he decided to join the military. So, the guy's around 40, I believe he's 40 years old. He's right around my age. I think he's like a year older. And, I mean, here we go. Listen to what comes out of his mouth.
But there's a third lesson that I learned in Iraq that's a little bit harder to come to terms with. And that is what it means to feel let down, even betrayed by political leaders in Washington. Playing politics with war and foreign policy takes on a whole new meaning when you know some of the people who die as a result. We must do everything we can to prevent that from happening again, and that is why I care so much about our foreign policy and about moral leadership.
So let me just stop it right there. So, we're playing on heartstrings. I mean, everybody that I know that's reasonable doesn't want our soldiers to be in a bad position, doesn't want them to die, doesn't want them to come home without a limb, of course. And he plays up, being a veteran. So, very smart politician stuff. And by the way, the capture on this wasn't that great, so it stutters a little. And I did cut out a few scenes, so that's just a warning on this one.
And I've never been more concerned about both. Basically, I wanted to rebuild the foreign policy that we had before this administration. But now I realize that that's not possible. And inherent in this disaster is an opportunity.
And he's talking about the Trump administration as if the Trump administration is a disaster to our foreign policy. I think it's been a disaster in the fact that Trump hasn't owned up to what he said he's going to do. But again, he really obfuscates everything, and he tries to play this Russian nonsense up that he knows is bull. It's absolute bull.
When your old house gets damaged by a bad renter, or in this case, a terrible president, you don't just restore it to look like it was built in 1950. You take the opportunity to renovate it. You don't just rebuild, you build something new, something more relevant, something better. That's what's required of our foreign policy today. In with the new and more difficult but as important, out with the old. This means recognizing the new arms and new alliances we need and the old weapons and old wars we don't. In with the new and more difficult but as important.
Oh, sorry, I repeated that one, but I think it's worth repeating because again, New. This reminds me. I mean, I almost played my another section of Invisible Empire. Let's go to that, guys. If you haven't seen that, again, we're going to play a section a little bit later, but it's right on the front page, and it really discusses a lot of that. George Bush Sr., George H.W. Bush, went on a New World Order tour. A tour, I promise you. That is a reality. He pushed that into, it's more than just the small clips you've seen. I know a lot of people have taken some of the stuff out of my film, but I couldn't fit it in my film enough. I mean, there was so much footage there. So let's go back to Malton here and let him continue.
Out with the old. This means recognizing the new arms and new alliances we need, and the old weapons and old wars we don't. I'll focus on these three areas where we need next-generation thinking, where we need newer, smarter, stronger arms, alliances, and arms control. First, our arms. There were times when I was fighting on the ground in Iraq at the pointy tip of the spear, as we like to say, and our insurgent or terrorist enemies were beating us on the internet. That was unacceptable then, and it's worse now.
Let's stop. Complete lie. And let me tell you why. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, Jason, don't Muslim extremists use the internet to recruit people? Sure. But we've been caught so many times faking things. And what do I mean? Well, if you look at this ISIS video, now this was the beach video here where they were walking people down, even Fox News, as pro-war as it gets, this is 2015, they had to admit that this video obviously showed that they were on some kind of green screen and that the camera angles were all wrong and these people appeared to be 7 feet tall. Okay? This is an in-depth article. I remember covering, I think, on maybe Dangerous Conversation or something like that. But you can read it. You can look at that video. It looks fake as hell. Now, Jihadi, I believe this is supposed to be Jihadi John, who was recently killed, by the way, I believe in a drone strike. Okay? They have him taking off this journalist's head. Now, I cannot confirm that this video is even real. But around that same time, the media completely ignored the fact that a hacked McCain staffer, apparently, cell phone video revealed this. And if you look, again, this could be fake. I want to put that out there. This has never been confirmed to be fake or confirmed to be real. But it sure lines up a lot with this. From the straps on the arms, I mean, take a look, guys, to the bald-headed man, to the fact he looks a little bit more portly, all right? To the possible beach-like scenario that they shot. I mean, with the sand, give me a break. So once again, for this guy to act like, oh, they're better at internet propaganda, it's bullshit. We are the kings of digital propaganda. And I'm sick of this myth that somehow, Islamic extremists are beating us on the internet. Total nonsense.
We have to stop fighting today's battles on yesterday's battlefields. Today we face great power competition from two adversaries like we haven't seen since the lead up to World War II. And we run the serious risk of being entirely leapfrogged by China and Russia with new technologies.
Now, let me stop you there. That's true. Okay? Again, I told you that he was going to tell you some truth here. And as far as China goes, I think there's just such a interlocking, kind of parasitic almost relationship between the United States and China that I'm not as worried as everybody else of them leapfrogging us technologically. I'm more worried of us adopting things like their social credit score, because there's another big lie that's going to be told, and that's when we're going to go to Invisible Empire, about surveillance in China. It's terrible there, but they're just more outward with it. They've just gotten the people to accept it more. It's happening here all the time. Believe the hype. It may be worse here in many respects, believe it or not. Believe it or not. And I'll tell you why it might be worse. When you're saying, Jason, how could it possibly be worse? We volunteer more in more mass. Believe it. All right? A lot of those people over there, they're working all day. They're not taking selfies all day. At a cushy job, you're working, out of the 8-hour day, maybe 3 actual hours. And the rest of the time, you're buzzing away on social media and Snapchat. All right? So we have to get that into a reality. Now, Russia, that's a real threat. I've got to say, Putin is correct. Whoever masters AI first will be the dominant force in the next century. It's true. In this century, really. I mean, it's coming so fast. And will that domination ever be surpassed or usurped? I don't know. We don't know how far AI and autonomous everything is going to take us. So let's go back to Moulton here. Remember, Democratic congressman from Massachusetts, former military man, Harvard graduate, and let's let him continue.
China is not trying to compete with our 11 carrier Navy by building 12 or 13 or 14 of their own. 1,238. That's the number we should have top of mind. That is our best estimate for how many Chinese anti-carrier missiles you can buy for the price of one U.S. carrier. Here's another way to look at our colossal surface Navy. I asked the CNO in a hearing a couple years ago, how many times have the Chinese attacked a U.S. carrier? Never, sir. How many times have the Chinese attacked us through the internet? In the last 24 hours, sir? The punchline is this: we're investing 16 times more in carriers than in cyber. We need to re-examine that balance. And I'll also point out, with regards to the South China Sea, that it's a lot harder to sink an island than an aircraft carrier.
So let's stop it there. He's 100% right about that as well. Now, all this hype with Huawei and whether they were spying, that may be more of a trade war thing. Remember when Bloomberg came out with that huge article that they said that there was this backdoor mini chip that was being put on RAM? Well, I didn't see anyone present that piece of hardware, and that's also up in the air as well. Now, that being said, of course, China is involved in cyber espionage across the world. They're far from the only country and world power to do so. From the United States to
Hello,
Russia.
freak
What is
bitches.
going on
I
here?
got a question for you, man.
Okay.
So,
How is that? Oh, sorry, the live leak. Well, hopefully we didn't get pulled for that. Hopefully we don't get pulled for that one, guys. A little Rogan goes, sorry, I left that one video of the possible fake beheading up there, guys. But hey, once again, he is right in the respect that cyber espionage is real, but when he talks about China, a lot of that's going to be corporate as well. Israel's doing the same thing. The United States is doing the same thing. You better believe the European nations are doing the same thing. So none of this is really, unique to just the nations he's talking about. Are they the world leaders? Yes. Do they often work with one another? Yes. I mean, even Russia and the United States, hey, there are points where we have to work with one another, guys. So let's continue with Sean Moulton.
I think Russia and China actually have an inherent advantage over us by being more budget constrained and less politically constrained by the military-industrial complex. They don't have the luxury of trying to compete with our big, expensive legacy weapon systems.
Boom. Now that's a big point. Think about what he just said there. He talked about the military-industrial complex. Remember, I just did a video on Trump and the military-industrial complex. When he really told the truth, he said, hey, as soon as I said I wanted to get out of Syria, everybody freaked out. They want to stay there forever. And what did he just talk about? Legacy weapon systems. What does that mean? Missiles, bombs, drones. Those are, although, you could argue that drones really aren't legacies, but they've been around forever. Remember, when we read the entire Northwoods documents, we had drones back then. These aren't new. I know we're talking about different technologies, but as far as drones being used in warfare, it's been a long time now. They are many legacy weapon systems. And the military-industrial complex doesn't want to stop the proliferation of that, no matter how useless, because they like the bloat. They like the billions and trillions of dollars that these arms sales brings. That's what this complex is about. So he's right in the sense that when you look at something like Russia, they don't allow a bunch of different companies to just compete, and they are not wasteful with their weapons. You look at what they did in the Iraq War, what you could see in 2006, 2007 in documentaries and on the internet, okay, where, you know, the laundry scandals, they're blowing up tanks and trucks right there. I mean, it was disgusting what they were doing and getting away with. And I'm sure those practices continue today. So when he talks about that bloat, it is real, and I do believe that he's right that China and Russia both have an advantage there because, you know, they're more straightforward with working with the government. They don't have much more of a choice. That's a bad thing. But it's not a good thing that we spend hundreds of billions of dollars just in black budgets alone on the military-industrial complex that we never, ever talk about. And we have endless money for war, but we can't afford health care for people in this country. I mean, give me a break. And we could talk about that forever, but we're going to continue with Seth Moulton's vision of a new world order.
So they have to develop the smaller, cheaper, next-generation weapons to defeat them. Having no real response to China's plan to be the world leader in artificial intelligence, or AI, by 2030 is unacceptable. We need to dramatically up our investment in autonomous, hypersonic, and cyber weapons to compete and win.
Autonomous, hypersonic, and cyber weapons. This is where it gets scary because he's really talking AI. And are we going to just put all of our weapon systems into the hands of artificial intelligence? I mean, I think that's a little insane. We already have madmen at the helm. Who's to say we're going to program these things any better? Or, I mean, I just, you know, that's a pretty frightening proposition. And I follow, you know, everything out there that's, you know, on quantum computing and where we are on AI. And, you know, the D-Wave systems were fascinating. And now these, quantum annealing systems are also fascinating. But where is this actually going to take us? Is the singularity a reality? And should we ever allow artificial intelligence to take over?
Second, I'd like to talk about arms control. While I feel we are woefully behind in making the commitment we need to next-generation arms, at least we are starting to discuss it. I haven't heard anyone discussing next-generation arms control at all. And here's why it's so important. Most people think of arms control as purely a way of making us safer by decreasing the number of weapons owned by everyone. But done well, arms control also makes us stronger by giving us a strategic advantage. For example, if the US and Russia agree to comparable reductions in ICBMs, but our missiles are more accurate or more reliable, then we have the advantage. That is why I was such a strong advocate 4 years ago for a worldwide convention to limit the proliferation of drones. Back then, we were still far ahead of the rest of the world in that technology, and limiting them may have solidified that advantage.
And, you know, he's even going to talk about some of the faults with that in a second. I don't know that that could absolutely work. I mean, first of all, how are you going to stop the proliferation of a technology that a military superpower has? Every other military superpower is going to not only, you know, try to develop those weapons, but develop them better. And, you know, to try to get a treaty or whatnot, have we been honest with our treaties? I don't know that we have. I don't know that, you know, Russia has. In fact, Trump got us out of one of the biggest nuclear treaties with Russia ever this year, and it's hardly ever discussed because he's supposed to be a puppet of Putin in the media. Think about that. You know what? We're gonna bring that right up because I don't know that everybody realizes that. Something I know we covered over at We Are Change, but let's do it. Trump leaves Russian nuclear treaty. Yeah. I mean, he's such a puppet of the Russians. He wants to leave a key nuclear treaty. This is February of this year. This is actually right around the time, I think that this speech took place in February, like maybe a couple weeks afterwards. So there you have it. Kind of insane, if you ask me. So let's continue.
Now, this particular idea may or may not have worked, but the principle is one we need to pursue. We need to start thinking of arms control not just with traditional weapons, but with new ones as well. Authoritarian regimes have an inherent advantage in developing AI weapon systems because, one, surveillance gives them much a bigger access to much bigger data sets, and two, they are not necessarily beholden to the same moral principles controlling their employment.
Well, that was a steaming pile of bullshit. That's what that was. Think about what he just said there. As if we're more moral than those countries. As if we're not surveilling everybody digitally all the time. And first, I want to focus on this article from The Intercept just this week, just a few days ago actually, where your cell phone company is watching you more closely than ever. And I did a video on this with Pulse Change, with Luke, and it talks about just about everything, them using ACR software, your habits, GPS, okay, your browsing, your text messaging, and they're not just building a database on you and a profile on you and selling them to governments. I think it was 50 to 100 different corporations and governments across the world had easy access to this. I mean, this one's a real extensive article. But everybody that is in contact with you, what does that mean? Well, maybe grandma doesn't have a Facebook, okay? Maybe you don't have a Facebook, but every one of your friends does. And every time you call them and you have a conversation, well, it builds a profile on you. Builds a profile on when you text them, where you text them, what your GPS data is on your phone. Everything. You can't get around it. And this is not new. And that's why we're going to stop his New World Order speech for just a second. And we're going to play an excerpt from my film, Invisible Empire, that clearly shows this has been going on forever. Hepting versus AT&T is the case that I'm going to refer to. Anybody can look this up, twice thrown out of court. But this suit was from 2002, 2003. I believe it went back to 1999 and before, where they were putting secret server rooms. Okay, you can take a look right here. Secret server rooms where they would siphon off all the information to the NSA. So this has been going on forever. This is pre-Snowden. I'm going to let my doc speak for itself.
That they have been tracking, tracing, and databasing our lives for years. Many people are aware that the Bush administration engaged in warrantless wiretaps on American citizens. What they don't understand is that it's come out in court that all the major telecommunications companies have been secretly storing every piece of data received from our phones and our computers and handing them over to the National Security Agency.
You heard about the government secretly listening in on phone conversations without a warrant. But there is evidence that your email is also being tapped. The government has been intercepting most emails as part of its terrorist surveillance program. That program has been criticized as illegal because it's missing an important ingredient: search warrants. Several years ago, Klein says he came to suspect that AT&T had installed secret computer gear designed to spy on internet traffic at the request of the National Security Agency.
This is just a small part of the picture, as AT&T was not the only company involved and emails were not the only issue. The NSA was installing Norris Insight systems, which are capable of monitoring billions of bits of internet traffic per second. It was also able to monitor any calls traffic through its system, all websites visited, all instant messaging, and separate types of transaction records.
The secret room at AT&T contains gear which enables the government to look at every individual message on the internet and analyze exactly what people are doing. Here's another document. It mentions a company called Norris. Norris makes computer software that can swallow and analyze 10 gigabytes of information every second. That means it could go through all the information in all the books in the Library of Congress in a little over 15 minutes.
The documents Klein and others were able to produce were then censored by the NSA.
Bankston isn't allowed to talk about the documents in detail. The government has since had them sealed. But he says what is in there boggles the mind.
We are talking about a substantial portion of all the communications traffic in the United States.
The policies have been shielded by the Obama administration and continue to this day. Attorney General Holder has publicly stated lawsuits be thrown out of court. And after several attempts, Klein and other cases were thrown out as well. Once again citing the national security of what used to be a constitutional republic, not a massive corrupt slave state.
And there you go. So now you know that this guy, again, is full of shit. And that there is, I mean, again, if you didn't know from the Snowden leaks, if you didn't know from the Vault 7 leaks, that all this stuff is a reality. The Track Trace Database Society is real. So the idea that we don't have as good or better data sets since, let's be honest, the average American has a lot more free time than the average person in Asia that's trying to hustle and make his way. Now, the average person in Asia that lives in a rural community might not even have one of these yet, okay? But the average person in America does. So they have all the data sets in the world, so he's being dishonest here as well.
Much sooner than later, we'd be wise to consider what kinds of arms control over autonomous weapons powered by artificial intelligence will make us safer. Third, alliances. This is where the analogy of the destructive house renter is most apropos, and where an entire renovation is required. In the wake of Trump's handling of NATO, many will call for re-strengthening that alliance, and I am among them. But NATO was established under 1949 rationale. Just as we're not going to counter Russia's amazingly successful work at undermining democratic elections by simply refurbishing our nuclear arsenal, we need to rethink the strategic role and purpose of NATO. Now is the opportunity, presented to us ironically by this administration, to renovate and strengthen it for a new world.
You know what he sounds like when he says things of strengthening and renovating for a new world, using a disastrous opportunity? Sounds very Kissinger-esque, doesn't he? Sounds a lot like Henry. I wonder if he likes, Trump likes to meet with Henry Kissinger. I wonder if Mr. Moulton's met with Henry Kissinger. Let's take this opportunity to build more, to build a new, better system.
Likewise, we should be re-examining our troop commitments to places like Japan and Germany. And we should be asking whether it makes sense to establish a Pacific NATO to counter China.
You just hear him? You're worried about Japan and Germany. Those troops. Barely anybody knows that we have troops and bases there anyway. And they're minimal. And we're not bombing their populations. Not mentioning Somalia or the Sudan or Syria or Afghanistan. You do mention Syria, but we just can't leave. I don't know. We can't just leave without a plan. And then he'll talk about, how it's so much worse there after our military intervention. Well, that's on purpose as well. We went there to destabilize the region. This is the plan, man.
In the Middle East, as the war on terror approaches the 2-decade mark, America's continued presence in Afghanistan and Iraq makes these the longest wars in American history. And the entire region is more disrupted and more disruptive than when we began.
A lot of truth there. Absolute truth. But it's done on purpose. And again, these wars don't seem to be going anywhere.
We attacked a grease fire with a pail of water, and now the entire kitchen is ablaze. There are nearly 4 times as many Sunni extremists in the world today as there were in 2001. And although the administration celebrates how little territory ISIS now controls, which is a near meaningless measure of an insurgency's strength, Sunni extremists worldwide control more territory now than they did then. These facts compel serious questions about our continued strategy in the war on terror. Now, we can't simply abandon places like Syria without any plan. Because, as our experience in Iraq faithfully demonstrated, we'll just have to come back.
Wait, why would we have to come back? Unlike Iraq, we didn't hang their leader in public because we didn't beat him. Because Assad is still there. So why in the mother flippin' heck would we ever have to come back? I don't get that. What are we talking about here? I'm all for helping the refugees, finding them places to live, hopefully letting them return. But that doesn't mean allowing al-Nusra forces dressed up like white helmets to do so. And that doesn't mean sanctions on countries. And that doesn't mean PMG, private military group forces going in there either. So what the hell are you talking about, Seth? We can't just leave, but we got to still dominate that region. Are you acting like that regime is still not in power? Are you acting like the OPCW report hasn't leaked? That we don't know that was staged 100% now? I mean, the work of Pearson Sharp and Fisk has been out there. Tulsi Gabbard asking Mattis as it happened if there was any evidence, and he had none. That didn't stop the missiles from flying, did it, Seth?
And it will take more American lives to do so. But for all our wars, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and the many small wars beyond, we need clear and achievable missions, approved by Congress and transparent to the American people, so that our troops can fight for peace and know what they must achieve to come home for good. Just as we admire President Roosevelt for leading us into World War II, we should admire President Eisenhower for leading us out of Korea.
Well, actually, we should also admire President Eisenhower for putting a name to the disgusting, disturbing, despicable face of the military-industrial complex that you talked about. You know, that financial, spiritual, military battle that he was talking about in the 60s, baby. Something you openly admitted there was a problem because of our legacy weapon system. No, there's a lot more problems than that, isn't there? There absolutely is. So here we go. He's about on his coup de grace last minute or so. This is when he's going to name it by name, folks, and show who he is.
Finally, climate change must be part of our thinking about alliances as well. Syria presents a particularly compelling example of how a conflict with origins in social upheaval combined with the pressures of climate change, as mounting evidence focuses blame on the region's historic drought, can quickly become a multi-dimensional war.
He literally slipped in climate change into the Syrian conflict and war, something that promotes carbon taxes and the control of people and their property, and really is about eugenics and things like one-child or sterilization policies. Again, that's something, I have a section in Invisible Empire. I'm not going to be playing that one. I thought about it, but we're already at a half an hour plus on this video, so let's let them just wrap it up.
Climate change won't wait, and neither should we. It's a threat to our national security. We obviously need to get back into the Paris Accord, but that isn't enough. The time to act is now, and new alliances to prevent it are a good place to start. In summary, it's time to completely reimagine our arms, our alliances, and our arms control for this new and rapidly changing world. All three are indispensable to meet the challenges of the New World Order, which emphasizes the importance of an all-hands-on-deck approach to national security.
Let's let him repeat it, guys, because, I often get accused of putting things in, words in people's mouths, or sometimes, I'm also accused of somehow distorting what they say. And that's why I love this live stream platform. And that's why I love you guys. Because I'm able to break down large portions of people's speech live in high definition, give my thoughts on it. But if you want to find that source material, you can do so too. Pretty easy to find. The internet in 2019, with all its faults, has a great number of tools for researchers like myself. So let's hear Seth Moulton at the Brookings Institute, a globalist organization, talk about that New World Order one more time.
Act is now, and new alliances to prevent it are a good place to start. In summary, it's time to completely reimagine our arms, our alliances, and our arms control for this new and rapidly changing world. All three are indispensable to meet the challenges of the New World Order, which emphasizes the importance of an all-hands-on-deck approach to national security.
So there it is, guys. That's the wrap. I want to remind everybody, I am raising money at this GoFundMe, Bilderberg/2019. We're a little under half of our goal. I did get some info on that today, letting everybody know. Supposedly, from one of my sources, one of the journalists that actually covers this thing, they're saying it's going to be the 30th, I believe. Yes, the 30th to June 2nd. Does not have a location, does not have a list, does not have an agenda yet. And he said he may even be wrong on the date. I would hope it's maybe even the week after that, but he is a good source. Guys, I want to remind you, I also tweet and I also simulcast these over on Twitter as well. Obviously, I'd prefer you doing it on the YouTube because it does reach a larger audience. But if you want to see some of the other stuff I tweet, Please make sure that you are subscribed, you're thumbing this video up, you're sharing it on social media. I'm still locked out of my fan page, and I'm pretty much getting rid of Facebook. Ordered a new phone, not even going to install it on there. I suggest you do the same. I think you might want to do the same if you take a look at this Intercept article, or just some of the stuff that I've been covering on Facebook and other social media apps and automated content recognition and all that stuff over the years. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and I will be back with more. And thank you, Josh Williams, for that super chat. Always love the super chats. Thank you for telling me great work. I really appreciate it. Guys, we'll be back very, very soon. Remember, I still do stuff for We Are Change and Pulse Change every day. Thanks again.